Andy Bannister asks if sincerity matters when it comes to your beliefs. Then he falls off the short bus and fails to recognize that he's guilty of absolutely everything he criticizes in others. If you're looking for a good reason to reject these asinine beliefs, you've come to the right place. It's always a toss-up which of the commonly evaluated apologists around here is actually the worst. Andy Bannister, the gang over at Stands Against Reason, Frank Turek. I don't know. But Andy has a special place in the Hall of Useful Idiots because he's so consistently clueless about the real world. He clearly pays no attention to what he says, because if he did, he'd recognize that everything he criticizes in others, he does himself. And this time, he proves it once again as he tries to ask if being sincere is an excuse for believing stupid things. And he asks this sincerely. So let's go watch the train wreck.
Can't you just believe whatever you want to believe as long as you're sincere?
Well, I certainly can't stop you, at least unless you're doing something that violates the law or causes harm in others. I just haven't developed amazing telepathic powers yet that allow me to change what goes on in that vacuum of a head of yours. Although that would certainly make the world a better place, wouldn't it? I guess the question here isn't can you, it's should you. Obviously you can, but should you? That's what I'm going to take a look at.
I hear versions of that question all the time. And I think built into it is the idea that, we live in this very diverse world with people of all kind of different political beliefs and religious beliefs and all kinds of beliefs floating around. And wouldn't it just be much more harmonious if, rather than tell other people they're wrong and try and convert them to our belief system, if we just said, hey, it doesn't matter. Believe whatever you want to believe. Be a Muslim, be a Hindu, be a Jedi, be a Christian, be whatever, as long as you're sincere.
The problem is, none of those things are actually intellectually valid. You can think you're a 50-foot-long fire-breathing red dragon in your head, and there's nothing I can do to stop you. You're insane, but I certainly can't force you to change your mind so long as that belief doesn't lead you to violate the law or harm anyone else. So yes, you absolutely can do all of that if you really want to. The better question is, should you? Should you believe that any of those things accurately represents the objective reality that you live in? And honestly, I don't think you can make a rational case that they do, because you can't intellectually justify your position. You have no intelligent reason to think that position is so, thus you shouldn't buy into it. That you do, that shows that you're not interested in the facts, only in your feelings, and when it comes right down to it, that's downright pathetic.
What could possibly be wrong with that approach to the world?
Everything. But Andy here is guilty of doing everything wrong, just like the idiot who thinks he's a dragon. I don't care how good it feels to think that your magical beliefs are true. They aren't demonstrably true in the real world. This is unfortunately commonplace today, not only in the world of religion, but pretty much everywhere else. The number of people who think they're actually anthropomorphic animals living in a human skin, the number of people who think that they can change genders half a dozen times a day, the number of people who think that they live on a flat earth, or who follow an imaginary man in the sky. These are people who care about feelings first, and reality never. And they don't seem to understand that what they're doing is wrong.
Well, of course, what could be wrong with that approach to the world is it mistakes sincerity for reality. You see, you can believe something sincerely, but actually be sincerely wrong, and that wrongness have consequences.
Andy is an idiot, because he's so theologically blind that he doesn't recognize that he does exactly this every single day. All theists do. They might sincerely believe in all the religious hokum they buy into, but they do so for emotional, not rational reasons. They do it because it feels good, not because it's intellectually justifiable in the real world. Then they point fingers at everyone else and ignore the fact that they are just as guilty. Hypocrisy, thy name is Andy Bannister.
Let me give you a real-world illustration. Imagine that you're at Edinburgh Airport, you've just boarded the plane to fly to New York for a well-earned holiday, and just as you settle down in your seat, the captain comes on over the tannoy and he announces, he said, "Hey, I've got some really interesting news to share with everybody on the flight today. I've figured out that actually the winds are so strong in the jet stream across the Atlantic that we don't need the engines. The engines are just a con foisted on us by Rolls-Royce to sell engines. So actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn the engines off on the aircraft once we're at cruising altitude and just let the winds blow us all the way across the Atlantic." Isn't that exciting? Think of the carbon footprint it will reduce. Would you honestly, no matter how sincere that captain sounds, would you stay on that aircraft, or would you be running for the exit and getting off that plane before it takes off to certain doom?
But your beliefs are just as stupid, Andy. That captain's beliefs are entirely harmless right up until he decides to put them into practice, at which point they become harmful to others, just like religion. Just ask all of the dead children killed by parents who were sincerely convinced that God would magically cure them of easily treatable diseases. Just ask all of the dead people killed in various religious wars around the world, murdered by people sincerely convinced their God had ordered the slaughter. Just ask the Jews that died in the concentration camps after Hitler was sincerely convinced that God had ordered him to exterminate them. Sincerity doesn't mean truth, and it doesn't matter if you're talking about a crazy pilot over the mid-Atlantic or a Muslim suicide bomber wearing a bomb vest. It doesn't matter what you believe, it matters what you can prove. And the religious can't prove a damn thing.
Of course you'd be getting off, because it doesn't matter how sincerely the captain has convinced himself that you don't need aviation fuel, ultimately that's going to end in disaster.
Just like your religious beliefs. Even if you don't go gunning down an abortion doctor for the Lord, you are harming yourself with these asinine beliefs, wasting the only life you demonstrably have on a pipe dream and empty promise of an eternal paradise. Now, hey, if you want to screw yourself up, I don't really care. But the religious don't tend to stop with themselves. They tend to pollute their children and their communities with this religious claptrap too. They harm others with their idiotic beliefs. Sincerity doesn't mean reality, Andy. It goes for you too.
And the same plays out through history. There are plenty of examples of people in history who sincerely believed things, but what they sincerely believed caused no end of chaos and disaster and tragedy. Think of Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich and the Final Solution.
Who was a Christian who believed that God wanted him to kill the Jews, gypsies, atheists, and gays. But people like Andy don't want to acknowledge that, do they?
Or think of Joseph Stalin and how his attempts to apply communism to the Soviet Union resulted in the death of hundreds of millions of people.
You do know he used religion, at least later on in his communist career, right? Because religion is the opiate of the masses. It keeps them calm and happy while the slaughter goes on around them, often at their own hands. But yeah, we won't talk about that, will we?
You can be sincerely wrong, very, very sincerely wrong, and hurt all kinds of people in the process.
Just look at the Crusades, which counts over 1 million casualties. Heck, look at the Muslim takeover of India between 1000 CE and 1525 CE, where an estimated 80 million Indians were killed. It's estimated that more than 110 million Africans were murdered in the Muslim slave trades, where more than 80% of captives died before reaching market. We can look at the German Peasants' War, which took place at the height of the Protestant Reformation, which resulted in more than 100,000 deaths at the hands of Christians. or the Algerian Civil War run by Islamic rebels which cost 200,000 people their lives, or the activities of the Lord's Resistance Army in Central Africa, which had an estimated death toll of 200,000 people, or the Great Turkish War, as Christian states joined together to push back the Ottoman Empire, resulting in 300,000 people dead, or the French Wars of Religion, where French Protestants and Catholics spent 36 years massacring each other with 3 million corpses to show for it. Or how about the 30 Years' War, where Protestant and Catholic princes fought for control over what would be modern Germany, where 1/3 of the German people died, more than 10 million people. We don't even have to stay in Europe. We can go look at, say, China's Taiping Rebellion, where a poor man has a nervous breakdown, reads some religious pamphlets left by Portuguese missionaries, and decides he's the brother of Jesus. He gathers a following called the God Worshippers and launches a rebellion, resulting in the death of 20 million innocent people. The list goes on and on and on.
You see, the best test for what you believe is not whether you're sincere, but actually whether what you believe is true.
And Andy, what you believe is not demonstrably true. I'm sure you're absolutely convinced that it is, but that's just sincerity, not evidence. The fact is, you don't care about evidence any more than your supposed airline pilot does. You believe because it makes you feel good, not because your beliefs make any rational sense. But because you're so emotionally invested in these silly beliefs, you can't see where you fail every bit as badly as those you criticize. Honestly, Andy, what the hell is wrong with you?
And when it comes to religious claims, this especially matters. You know, the heart, when it comes down to it, the reason I'm a Christian, the reason I've been a follower of Jesus for 25 years is not because I believe it sincerely, although I do, but because I put it to the test. And I've looked very long and hard at the life and the teaching and the claims of Jesus of Nazareth and come to the conclusion that he is true and that it's trustworthy.
The problem is, you just buy into the things it says in the Bible without asking yourself if what the Bible says is true in the first place. You get emotional comfort, and that's all you care about. Normal people don't look at Homer's tales in the Iliad and decide that the stories of Greek gods and goddesses are true, even though we now have evidence that the Trojan War actually happened. They understand that this is just mythology. It's made up. But you can't get that message through your head. Why is that?
But I guess the ultimate problem with making it all about the sincerity of a person's belief, no matter what they believe in, is of course it makes it all about me. It becomes all about how sincere I am, how intense my faith is, how passionately I believe something. And again, it just makes it very, very me centered.
Because it is. It's all about how these beliefs make you feel. Not whether or not they're true, because you have no evidence of that, but how they affect your emotional well-being and have a positive impact on your life. It is all about you, Andy. That's why you don't go looking to see if the Bible is defensively correct in its assertions. It makes you feel good, so you believe it.
You see, at the heart of the Christian faith stands the incredible news that it's not about how strong your faith is. Jesus said you can have faith as small as a mustard seed, one of the smallest seeds in the world, if your faith is in the right thing.
Again, you're buying into the nonsense in the Bible because you want it to be true, not because it demonstrably is true. You care what this character in a book supposedly says more than you care about the defensibility of those claims.
You see, it's not the sincerity or the depth of your faith that matters, it's the object of your faith.
Based on wishful thinking, not intelligent investigation. I'm sure no matter how many crazy people you talk to, they all say essentially the same thing. Of course what they believe is true. It's the only thing they found that makes any kind of sense, at least if you don't ask too many questions or have too many realistic expectations. Because the second you treat these religious claims like any other claim and expect evidence, it all falls apart like a house of cards in a windstorm. religion does not hold up to any kind of rational scrutiny. All the sincerity in the world doesn't change that.
And for 25 years of being a Christian, my faith has sometimes been strong, sometimes it's been weak. But my faith has been in the one who is trustworthy, in Jesus Christ. He is the only one, I believe, in whom it is worth putting your trust. And whether your faith is small or your faith is huge, I encourage you, put your faith in Jesus Christ.
Why? Because you haven't proven that Jesus is real. It doesn't matter what you want to be true. It only matters what is actually true, and that can only be determined by producing evidence. Actual, objective, demonstrable evidence that stands up to critical scrutiny and rational evaluation. And the religious have none of that at all. So the religious invent outs for themselves. Oh, they don't actually have to have any of that. Here's an excuse or an ad hoc rationalization for why they don't have to follow the same rules as everyone else, because their religion is special. Well, maybe special in the short bus kind of way, but otherwise, no. Your religion isn't special. It doesn't have a get-out-of-reality free card. It has to stand up to the same kind of intellectual scrutiny as everything else, and if it fails, as it does miserably, then intelligent people who care more about the facts than about feelings, those people have no business taking any of it seriously at all. But the religious, they don't care. It's all about the feels, not remotely about the reals. And they are so deluded, sincerely deluded, about the facts that they can't even see where they go entirely wrong. Andy here is a joke. Andy's beliefs are idiotic. I don't care how they make him feel. He doesn't even recognize how ridiculous he is. And while it might make him fun to laugh at, certainly no one with an ounce of credibility should do anything but pity Andy and his asinine blind faith. This man is a moron. Please don't be a moron too. You can be better than he is. Let's be honest. It's kind of hard to be worse.